you know, we had a big house with big wide pine floors. I wanted to make a rug and a rug for the house. All right, now this was a pattern that was irises all over the outside border. Big rug. Irises are rather complicated flowers. So I went to Meredith's class in the evening, soon after that, and just a lovely, lovely lady in every way. And she said to me, "Have you hooked before?" And I said, "Well, no, I haven't really. I sort of did this little doorstop, but no, I want to learn how to hook." And she said, "Well, we usually start with a pillow called Sue's Rose." And she brought out the pattern, and I looked at it, and I said, "But I really wanted to do a rug," and explained I had a house with floors, and I wanted a rug. And she said, "Well, it's sometimes easier to start with something small." So then I whipped out my rug, and she looked at this pattern, and she said, "Well, irises are rather difficult." So I kind of whined again and said, "But I love irises." And she said, she looked at me, and she looked at this rug, and she put her hands on her hips and looked again, and she said, "Well, irises it has to be." And I, you know, to this day, I probably would not have hooked beyond starting that rose that I didn't want to do. And I've thought of that so many times with students. Whatever they want to do, they can do it, and they'll be happy with it and finish it. And so anyway, that was my first introduction, and it wasn't an easy rug to do. Irises are complicated, but I was really into it, and I also had to start immediately dyeing my own wool, because with 2 kids in college at the time, I thought, I can't start something that's going to cost me a lot of money. And so I said to Meredith, you know, she was teaching in a second floor classroom. You had to climb up the fire escape practically to get it there at Essex Aggie, and her husband would bring all of her materials for the class, and John was great. But anyway, she had no place to do dyeing where she was teaching. So she said, you know, "I'll tell you what to do, and you can call me if you get stuck with something." And so she would instruct me, and I'd write it all down, exactly how to do the dyeing. And by this time, of course, I had all this woolen stuff that Lynn and I had accumulated from our mills. And we were able to buy. Then I would go back to see Lynn in Milford, and we'd go down to Oxford, and there was a fulling mill there. A fulling mill gets woolens from mill-end woolens from factories, and they make felt out of it. I don't know what they do to it, but they make felt out of these, but it's 100% wool. So these 3 brothers, the Krintzman brothers, owned the fulling mill in Oxford. And they were really, really funny, because they could make money selling these mill ends to hookers. There were a lot of women who did rug braiding and hooking in those days. So he, in the basement, before he'd consign this mill end stuff to the fulling process of making felt, would put yards and yards and yards of mostly white or natural wool. And sometimes he would even get stuff from Pendleton. And anyway, they often had holes in them or sample cutouts out of them, but that made no difference to a rug hooker. You just, you know, tore your wool and around those things. And they would sell it from between $1 a pound, which is approximately a yard of wool. Now it sells for retail, 3 years ago when I retired, retail at Door and, I'm sorry, wholesale price at Door and Woolrich, the only ones left. Pendleton makes Door's wool, that makes wool flannel. Anyway, wholesale price to me 3 years ago was between $17 and $18. Retail, back to your students, was about $24 a yard. All right, we were buying this for $1 a pound, $2 if it were white wool. But then again, I started accumulating barrels full of wool. from these places, but I could get the wool very cheaply, and it was great grade flannel wool, and dyed it myself and learned to dye right away because I felt I couldn't afford to buy dyed wool. Now, as a teacher, again, 3 years ago, a yard of dyed wool was $54 a yard, going up. It's more than that now. So you can, there's a lot of work put into dyeing wool. So anyway, I did my own dyeing, and I started back then and finished my iris rug. That was my first rug, and that's in my book, by the way. It's still a very pretty rug, and just went on from there with Meredith for about almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And I never went to any workshops then because I couldn't really feel that I could afford to do that. And, you know, teaching full time, I certainly, and I just didn't feel I could take my summers to do that. But Meredith was just a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And I never heard of anybody else in all those 20 years because I didn't know anybody in hooking circles.
Right.
So when we got to Lancaster, you know, after we came back from overseas, I was looking around. Well, actually, I wasn't doing any hooking overseas that 4 years, 3 to 4 years, and got home and just could not get back to it. You know, it's one of those things, you're getting resettled and you just don't take the time. And I said to your dad, I've got to get back to hooking. And there was a 3-day workshop in Fort Washington, about 2 hours away from Lancaster. So I thought, okay, you know, it was 2 overnights, and I said, I can drive back, it's only 2 hours, and Dad said, oh, go and stay for the weekend and have a good time. So I called the director, Mina West, who was one of the big names in rug hooking. Of course, I didn't know any of these people. I never heard of anybody else but Meredith. And so anyway, I called Mina West and I said, I'd like to come to the workshop, but I don't know any of the teachers listed, and I wouldn't know who to choose. And she said, well, have you had other teachers? And I said, well, only one. And I said, Meredith LeBeau in Salem, you know, she's up in Salem, Massachusetts. She said, Meredith LeBeau? Oh my goodness, yes, I know Meredith. Everybody knows Meredith. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So anyway, she said, you would really want to be with Nancy Blood. So I had never heard of Nancy Blood. So that was our first introduction, is our weekend in Fort Washington, and I've really taken workshops with her for the past 17 years, once a year. And a little time, after getting back into it, I decided I would like to go to teachers' workshops. So I called Meredith. She said, sure, I will recommend you. You have to have a teacher recommend you in order to go to teachers' workshops. So I then started that, and you know, after probably 4 years of getting that accreditation in, you know, a week in the summer, and decided I wanted to do some teaching. So then I started that, and that started the ball rolling. So that's the long, short story of how I got started in rug hooking. But every time I'd go to teacher's workshop and mention Meredith LeBeau, I mean, it was like, you were with Meredith for all that time? So, you know, I never appreciated what I had until I no longer had her.
Oh
you
my
know?
gosh.
Yeah, but she's was great.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well, thank you, Ma.
Okay.